Hi, folks. Welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The NTIA is allowing 4 states to categorize cellular fixed wireless as underserved in their BEAD program. Be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Quorum with Broadband Deployment News. So this is something that's been put out there. I reported back on this back in January that states were looking at doing this, and you see here there's an article in Broadband Breakfast. Some wireless services deemed underserved in 4 states, expanding BEAD locations. Providers will be able to rebut the claims. Wait a minute, I missed part of that. So basically, the states will be able to say that if there's fixed wireless service only that's provided by a cellular operator like maybe T-Mobile or Verizon, that's the only service that would then categorize that area as served. For example, let's say over 100 by 20, then what they're saying here is that should not be the case. So if you've got no other wired service or no, I guess, even fixed wireless that's not cellular, then that would be deemed unserved. Providers will be able to rebut the claims of underservice. In Georgia alone, the implementation of the cellular fixed wireless modification resulted in over 25,000 locations being reinstated on the state broadband map as eligible for BEAD funding. So the problem that you have here is that, again, you've got these vast areas of underserved territory, unserved or underserved, and then you can have a cellular fixed wireless provider come in that's providing something like mid-band fixed wireless using licensed spectrum. So it's licensed, it's fixed wireless. It's, let's say, they can report over the speeds normally that you would get to be served. But the problem is, the question is how reliable is that and how much capacity they have. That's always been a question for me, because I know here in the Atlanta area, if you want to get T-Mobile, you can go to their website and look at their fixed wireless site, and it will say limited time, limited availability, because one of the issues is that they are providing service for cellular customers as well as fixed wireless customers. And cellular is their bread and butter. That's where they have always made all of their money. And they don't want to damage that or have anything that would hurt that business. So they want to make sure that they don't oversubscribe fixed wireless customers and then have an issue with their cellular customers. So they need to limit the number of people they can take. And therefore, you don't have broadband available to everybody in that area, whereas if everybody were to take that broadband, for example, then the company would not have enough spectrum. So that's one of the issues. They bring up some other challenges in here as far as line of sight and those kinds of things, but that's kind of the crux of the issue for me. Unless the presumption is rebutted, each of the 4 states will be able to deploy government-favored technologies, including fiber, in these underserved areas. Underserved areas are prioritized second only to unserved locations in receiving funds from the $425 billion allocated by BEAD. So, I guess it's interesting that I guess they could also apply fixed wireless that's not cellular based. In other words, they're not serving cellular and fixed wireless customers. They would be doing fixed wireless only. And I suppose if they have licensed spectrum or licensed by rule, which would be CBRS spectrum, then that could be another technology that they could deploy in an area that's considered underserved because fixed wireless cellular is there only. So that's interesting. Change is expected to increase the number of eligible locations and decrease the number of challenges. In presumptively calling cellular fixed wireless underserved, the change in the 4 states is expected to decrease the number of challenges that state broadband offices will need to adjudicate during the BEAD challenge process. And that's because a lot of these challenges will be based around companies like T-Mobile and Verizon that are claiming that they have the area as served when they're the only ones there, and that can be taken off of the board now. That doesn't need to be challenged. It also shifts the responsibility of substantiating the service availability claims from governments and nonprofits to the service providers making the claims. And I suppose that means that T-Mobile could challenge the fact that they are able to provide that service, and they could. Although again, if it's cellular fixed wireless, I think it's still going to be considered underserved, again, because of the issues possibly of the amount of spectrum that they would have, and can they serve everybody if everybody would want to sign up? Many of these states cited capacity issues related to the technology due to limits in the amount of spectrum available and the shared nature of the bandwidth among users within a given coverage area. This shared nature can lead to congestion during peak usage times, reduced speed, and degraded performance. I think more importantly, the fact that the providers will protect that cellular mobile, I should say the mobile customers, they'll protect that at the expense of the fixed wireless customers if they have to. Cellular fixed wireless technology can also face limitations related to weather, geography, and line of sight issues, including signal attenuation from trees and buildings. Additionally, some wireless providers throttle users if they go over a certain usage cap. That is an issue. Line of sight and attenuation is much less with mid-band spectrum than it is with, for example, millimeter wave, where you can hardly get through trees, can't even get through trees. It's still somewhat of an issue, but I think it's probably going to be more depending on the territory, as we'll read here in a moment. While the NTIA's initial program rules designated fixed wireless technologies as reliable broadband service, the administration adopted new guidance in February, introducing the pre-challenge modification after numerous states raised concerns regarding the classification of cellular fixed wireless as reliable. Wireless providers affected by the state modifications have the chance to dispute assertions that they are not delivering service as claimed during the initial phase of state challenge processes. Following the providers, nonprofits, and government entities have the opportunity to counter that in a subsequent rebuttal phase. Vermont finds less than 5% of T-Mobile's availability claims to be accurate, and Vermont is one of those areas that's got some challenging terrain with very mountainous and lots of trees, lots of pine trees, which quite often are not very friendly to wireless signals, especially when it's been raining, because you've got the pine needles and they're just, depending on the spectrum, they're a certain distance apart, and when you get a little bit of rain between those pine needles, it's a very effective barrier to wireless signals, so that's a concern there. One of the earliest states to raise concerns about wireless, Vermont, reported that the process of getting the modification introduced involved extensive communication with the NTIA, as well as the provision of thorough evidence to support their case. Through conducting a series of studies, the state determined that less than 5% of service availability claims made by the largest cellular fixed wireless service providers in the state, and the largest, T-Mobile, were actually true. By adopting the modification, 503 broadband serviceable locations were put back on the state map designated as underserved. And it doesn't sound like that many, but again, we're talking about folks in areas that are maybe hard to reach where would be considered unserved, and now they're considered underserved, so they are fair game for BEAD funding. Vermont wrapped up the initial phase of their challenge process, during which T-Mobile did not submit any challenges to Vermont regarding the modification. Concerns about foliage density and line of sight. State's primary concerns regarding the technology related to foliage density and line of sight challenges attributed to the geographical features of the state, again, Vermont being very challenging. Vermont utilized various forms of evidence to present its case to the NTIA, including line of sight tests, mapping network equipment and towers, and mobile drive tests conducted by contractors who travel the state and ping towers to test the availability of cellular fixed wireless service. The state's findings may alarm some. Out of the 54,794 mobile device test points conducted across the state, approximately 51% of them had no T-Mobile signal. Out of 27,144 test points with a T-Mobile signal, only 14,025 were able to successfully complete both a full download and upload test. Further, among the locations where a full-speed test was conducted, T-Mobile provided mobile broadband services of 100 by 20 in just 5%, or 693 out of 14,025 locations. After examining wireless facility permits, the VCBB concluded that T-Mobile does not have facilities near many locations where it asserts it can offer 100 by 20 or superior fixed wireless broadband connectivity. So you can see right there, Vermont really did dig into this, did their due diligence to try to provide proof that this was going to be a problem. It talks a little bit about Missouri and Georgia and Nevada. Other states still have time to make modifications. States that have yet to have their Volume 1 plans approved by NTIA still have time to adopt their pre-challenge modification, which marks all areas solely served by cellular fixed wireless as underserved on state broadband maps. However, some states never had the chance. And I think there are maybe 22 to 24 states and territories that have not yet had their Volume 1 proposal approved, but the others have, so I guess maybe they're out of luck. Maybe they shouldn't be. States that had their Volume 1 approved before the NTIA released the new guidance in February never had the opportunity to go back and include the modification, and some have done it since, but maybe they missed the fact that this was approved in February or had been given some new guidance. It's a challenge when all the guidance isn't available when you're trying to develop the plans. The same thing is happening with Volume 2 right now. There's still additional guidance coming out. There's only one right now, that's Louisiana, that has their Volume 2 approved. We can't expect the NTIA to anticipate everything in advance. They're being responsive, and that's great, but it does make it challenging at the state level, he said. So it does seem to me that the states should be able to, even if they've had their Volume 1 approved, should be able to go back and request from the NTIA that same kind of response to that challenge. So again, they may have missed the fact that there was some guidance added later, or maybe they did get their Volume 1 approved prior to that guidance being issued. So it seems to me that they should be able to go back now and make some changes to that. I suppose maybe the question there is, you have to put that Volume 1 proposal out and then have public comment, those kinds of things, and maybe that drags things out. But maybe as part of their Volume 2, they can put some kind of amendment. It seems like that would be fair now that the NTIA has come out and said, yeah, it does make sense in these areas that fixed wireless via cellular is not going to be considered served. That certainly is going to impact lots of states. And as I mentioned, I think 20 or more have gotten their Volume 1 approval done. So in this case, it would be, unless it was one of the ones already like Georgia, Nevada, et cetera, unless it was one of those 4 states, then they're out of luck unless NTIA does something. So I think they should try to figure out a way to make that available to every state if they want to do that. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. If this was helpful, give me a like on the video. If you found it interesting, subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button and ring the bell to be notified when I'm live, and then you'll get a little notification in your browser. And you can choose to watch, you can choose to not watch, but make sure that you keep up with what's going on. I'm on here almost every day. See you next time. Bye-bye.